All right, welcome to another deep dive. You guys have been sending in some awesome stuff on English pronunciation. Looks like we're leveling up our speaking game. I got to say, I'm kind of pumped to dig into this, especially since you mentioned a big presentation coming up. We got to make sure you totally crush it.
Yeah, for sure. There's a ton to cover here, especially if you're just starting out. But zeroing in on what's really practical can make a huge difference, especially with a big goal in mind.
You know what I mean? It's not about being perfect or anything. It's about that confidence, right? Getting your point across. Speaking of which, one of the podcasts you sent my way was talking about how important pronunciation is for, like, just plain communicating. Never really thought about it like that.
It's easy to miss, yeah. But just think about it, someone mumbling, or getting words wrong, it just makes them harder to understand. And it can be distracting, right? Good pronunciation, though, it helps you, I don't know, command attention. And that makes whatever you're saying way more powerful.
Makes total sense. I've always been all about vocab and grammar, but pronunciation, it could make or break how you come across. This podcast also said that confidence actually helps you become more fluent. How does that even work?
Well, think about it. If you're confident about how you sound, you hesitate less when you speak, which means you just get more practice, right? That bumps up your fluency. So it's like a good cycle.
So it's not just knowing the sounds, it's feeling good making them. Okay, this one always gets me, those silent letters. Like, why is there a K in night if we don't even say it? Feels like a trap for anyone starting out.
They're kind of like echoes from the past, Older ways of saying things that have changed over time might seem confusing at first, but they tell a story about how English has changed.
Whoa, so it's like language archaeology. But let's be real. How do you get past that confusion starting out? Wouldn't it be easier if we just, spelled things the way they sound?
Oh, yeah. English spelling is, let's just say it's got its quirks, but there are patterns and rules you can learn. And hey, even native speakers trip up sometimes. Keeps things interesting.
True. And then there are those vowel sounds, beat and bit. Tiny difference on paper, huge E difference in what they mean. I can see that being a nightmare for new learners.
Vowels are definitely tricky, especially because they change depending on the accent. It's all about training your ear to hear those tiny differences and then practice making those sounds right.
So lots of listening and copying. What about consonant clusters, those tongue twisters? I still struggle with words like strengths. Any secrets to those?
Oh yeah, consonant clusters can be tough. They need you to really coordinate your tongue and mouth. One thing you can try is breaking the word into smaller parts and practicing each sound before putting them back together.
Okay, that's actually pretty helpful. Like, break it down into scren and then gruths. I might actually be able to say it without choking.
Exactly. The more you do it, the easier it gets. Speaking of practice, one of the articles you sent over mentioned this cool technique called shadowing. We tried that.
Shadowing. I'm picturing, like, following someone around and repeating everything they say.
Haha. Not quite. It's more like you're listening to a native speaker and trying to copy how they pronounce things, their intonation, all in real time. Basically, you're their pronunciation shadow.
Ooh, so it's like pronunciation karaoke. But wouldn't it be hard to keep up, especially when you're just starting?
It definitely takes some practice, but the trick is to start slow. Pick a short audio clip where the pronunciation is super clear and just try to repeat it as closely as you can. You can even record yourself and then compare, see how you're doing.
That's a really good idea. So it's not just passive listening. It's like actively trying to make the same sounds. It's a workout for your pronunciation muscles. Pronunciation workout. I like that. My tongue might actually be sore after this deep dive.
Well, just like a good workout, you got to push yourself, right? Speaking of pushing, another important thing about pronunciation is word stress.
Oh yeah, word stress. I remember learning about that, but it always seemed kind of mysterious. Like, how do you know which syllable to stress? Sometimes it's the first, sometimes the second, sometimes it feels totally random.
It can definitely feel random, especially at the beginning, but there are patterns you can start to pick up on. For example, a lot of two-syllable nouns, the stress is on the first syllable, like table or window. But then with two-syllable verbs, it's often on the second syllable, like decide or prepare.
Okay, so there are some rules, but it's not always super straightforward. Is there any way to actually practice word stress, or is it more about just listening and absorbing?
Listening for sure is key, but there are definitely things you can do to improve how aware you are of it and get better at it. You could try clapping or tapping your foot on the stressed syllable when you say the word. You could even really exaggerate the stress just to feel the difference it makes.
I like that. Turn it into a game. Now, one thing that always makes me nervous with pronunciation Intonation. It feels so subtle, you know, and I'm always worried I'll sound weird or fake.
Intonation is tricky, yeah, but it's also super important. It adds a whole other layer of meaning, right? Like you can use it to show emotions, emphasis, or even if you're asking a question.
So it's not just saying the words right. It's like using your voice to create the right vibe.
Exactly. Intonation can make you sound bored, excited, even sarcastic, all with the same words. It's like punctuation for speaking.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do you even start practicing intonation? It feels like you either have it or you don't.
Like anything with pronunciation, it just takes practice. One thing you can try is listening to native speakers, really paying attention to how their voice goes up and down, depending on what they're saying, and then try to copy them, play around with different inflections.
Okay, like a master class in intonation. But what about those times when you just freeze up and feel like you're going to mess up every word? I get so self-conscious, especially when I'm talking to other people.
That's totally normal, especially when you're still learning something new. The thing to remember is making mistakes is part of how you learn. It's actually super important.
Easier said than done, right?
Mhm.
I still cringe when I say something wrong, even if it's just chatting with friends.
I get it. But try to think about it differently. See mistakes as chances to learn and get better, not as failures.
Okay, yeah, that does take some of the pressure off. But I'm curious, to sound more like a native speaker, do you really have to lose your accent completely? Accents are part of who you are, right?
100%. Your accent is part of your identity, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's not about sounding exactly like someone else. It's about being clear, confident, and easy to understand.
So it's about finding that balance.
What?
Being myself, but also making sure people get what I'm saying. That's actually pretty freeing.
It is. And think about it. Even native speakers have different accents, right? Depending on where they're from or just how they speak.
True, true. It's not about wiping out everything that makes you you. It's more like using your pronunciation to express yourself better.
Exactly. And as you get more comfy with it, you'll see it's not just about making the right sounds. It's about using your voice to really connect with people on a deeper level.
Ooh, connect on a deeper level. One of the articles talked about connected speech, and that sounded kind of scary. What's that all about?
Connected speech. It's just how words sound when you're talking normally in a flow. It's not saying each word separately. It's how the sounds kind of blend together and change each other.
Whoa, it's like a secret language within the language.
In a way, yeah. Things like assimilation, where sounds change to be more like the sounds next to them. Or elision, where sounds disappear. Basically, your mouth is being efficient, finding the easiest way to say things.
That makes sense. Can you give me an example? What does that sound like?
Sure, think about want to. Most people say wanna, right? That sound blends into the end, so it's smoother.
Oh, wow. I do that all the time. Never realized it was a thing. How do you practice something like that? Is it just listening and copying again?
Listening is huge. Pay attention to how native speakers say whole phrases, not just single words. You'll notice those little blends. And recording yourself can help, you know? Listen back and see how your connected speech is doing.
Another good tip. I'm starting to see how all this stuff, the individual sounds, the word stress, the intonation, now this connected speech, it all works together to make you a better communicator.
Exactly. It's like putting together a puzzle, right? Each piece matters, and once you know the pieces, you can start getting creative with it, making your own style.
Love that.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm feeling way more confident about all this pronunciation stuff now.
Yeah.
It's a journey, for sure, but one I'm actually excited about.
That's what I like to hear. Remember, even small improvements make a big difference, both in how you sound and how confident you feel. Experiment, have fun with it, and celebrate the progress you make.
Speaking of progress, you mentioned before getting ready for a presentation. Any advice on how I can use all this to, really nail it?
For sure. Practice is key for presentations, especially for how you sound. Try recording yourself giving the presentation, and then listen back. See if there are any words or phrases where you trip up.
Identify the problem areas. Got it. Then what?
Then you can use all those techniques we've talked about, breaking words down, practicing the stress and intonation. You can really focus on those tricky parts.
A targeted pronunciation workout just for my presentation. I like it.
Yeah.
What about those words I just can't seem to pronounce right, even when I'm practicing?
Ah, yes, the word demons. We all have them. One thing that helps is to make a list of those words and practice them a lot. Use flashcards, online dictionaries that have audio pronunciations, or even record yourself saying them correctly and listen back to that a bunch of times.
Like a pronunciation cheat sheet. I love it. Speaking of tricky words, remember those fun facts we were talking about? Like common words even native speakers get wrong.
Yeah, I remember.
Well, I found a whole list of words I think I've been saying wrong forever. Like espresso. Apparently it's not espresso.
Haha, that's a classic. People see that express in there and get thrown off, but it's just an ez sound,
Wow.
espresso.
Mind blown. And sherbet doesn't have that second R sound. What else have I been messing up all this time?
Well, it depends on where you're from and how you talk, but the standard way to say it is with the R in both parts. Sherbet.
This is making me rethink everything, but in a good way. It just shows you, even in your own language, there's always more to learn.
For sure. And the more you learn, the more you realize just how interesting and complex pronunciation is. It's a never-ending journey.
Speaking of which, remember those silent letters? They're not just leftovers from the past. They can actually tell you about how words are related. Like, it has a silent G, right?
Yep, it does. And that silent G is a hint that it's connected to words like signature and signal, where you do pronounce the G.
Whoa, it's like a code. So even those weird parts of English pronunciation can teach you something.
Exactly. The more you get used to those patterns and connections, the less it feels like memorizing rules, and the more you see the logic and beauty of the language.
I love that. It's like pronunciation detective work, finding clues and figuring out how it all fits together. Which brings us back to the big question. Why does all this matter?
It's not about being perfect. It's about using your voice to communicate in a way that's clear, confident, and real, you know? It's about expressing yourself so people get what you're saying and feel it too.
And that's something everyone can work on, no matter what your accent is or how fluent you are. It's about the journey and finding the fun in learning.
Well said. And as you keep going, be kind to yourself, be proud of every step you take, and never forget just how powerful language is.
I'm really starting to get it,
Yeah.
It's not just about following the rules. It's like you're connecting with the whole history of the language, all the little details.
It's pretty amazing. And remember, we were talking about connected speech. That's a big part of what makes your English sound smooth and natural.
Right. Like how words kind of smoosh together when you're talking normally.
Yeah.
But if I'm being honest, thinking about all these extra rules on top of everything else, it's a lot. Where do you even begin practicing something like that?
Don't worry, it's not as hard as it sounds. The best way to get the hang of it is to just surround yourself with real English. Listen to podcasts, watch movies, heck, even just listen in on conversations. Pay attention to how native speakers connect words naturally.
It was more about absorbing it than memorizing a bunch of rules.
Exactly. Your ear will pick up on those patterns, and your mouth will naturally start following along. It's like dancing, right? At first, you're thinking about every single step, but eventually, it just flows.
Ooh, I like that analogy. Less robot, more like natural rhythm. But isn't there a risk of sounding like messy or something if you're not careful?
That's where finding that balance comes in. It's not about mumbling or dropping sounds altogether. It's about knowing which sounds naturally blend and which ones you need to, pronounce clearly so people understand you.
Okay, that sweet spot between being understood and sounding natural. As we've been talking, I've realized I've always been so focused on getting pronunciation perfect. But maybe that's not really the point.
I think you're on something there. It's great to aim for clear and accurate pronunciation, for sure. But don't forget to let your own voice come through, your own style.
So it's not about erasing my accent completely. Part of me feels like to be taken seriously, I have to sound like a textbook or something.
No way. Accents are what make language interesting. They're beautiful. Think about some of the best speakers you've heard. They often have really distinct accents that make them even more captivating.
That's true. I guess I've been so worried about sounding right that I forgot all about personality and expressing myself.
Exactly. And remember, the whole point of communication is to connect with people.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is to speak from the heart, to let your true self shine through.
This has been such a great deep dive, seriously. I'm seeing pronunciation in a whole new light now.
Yeah.
It's not just about rules and sounds, it's about so much more.
That's what I like to hear. And remember, this is just the beginning. Keep exploring, keep practicing, and most importantly, have fun with it.
I will, definitely. Well, I think we've covered everything from your notes and articles. It's amazing how much there is to say about something we usually don't even think about.
I know, right? Pronunciation is truly fascinating.
Well, thanks to you, I'm feeling way more confident and excited to keep learning. Who knows, maybe one day I could even help other people with their pronunciation journey.
I'm sure you will.
So to everyone listening, remember, clear, confident communication is totally within reach. Don't be afraid to try new things, let your own voice be heard, and enjoy the journey.
Happy speaking.